Hey there, it's Joseph again. Have you ever felt like there are moments in your life that are unfair? I'm not talking like you had a runaway sheep from your flock or, I don't know, your brother spilt food on your favorite coat of many colors. I'm talking about life-altering moments that feel really unfair. Moments when something happens and you feel hurt, sad, or even angry. I can't be the only one, right? Sometime after the whole dream fiasco, I could sense my brothers were still pretty upset with me. Between them thinking I was Dad's favorite child and me telling them they were bowing down to me in my dreams, things got pretty tense between us. There was this one day that my dad told me to go out into the field and check on my brothers. They were taking care of our family's flock of sheep. Dad says they can be careless sometimes, so he wanted me to check in on them. As I was walking up to check in on them, I could tell they were plotting something. They were huddled up, talking quickly and frantically. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they kept glancing over at me as I was walking towards them. The moment I arrived, before I could say anything, they jumped me, beat me up, and threw me into a well. Yeah, like a water well. If you thought that was bad, it gets crazier. As I was laying in the water well, my brothers were huddled up again, talking frantically, deciding what they wanted to do with me next. As they were talking, there were these Egyptian traders passing by. My brothers ended up selling me to these men for a couple pieces of silver. Yeah, you heard that right. They literally sold me into slavery. I look back at that moment, and even though it happened years ago and time has passed, it still hurts. This moment changed the direction of my life forever. My life was great until this happened. What my brothers did was messed up. What the traders did was cruel. But ultimately, how could God let something like this happen to me? It felt so unfair.
You've experienced that feeling before, right? The feeling of unfairness. You know what I mean. It's those moments where it seems like life just isn't going our way. We feel hurt and sad, or even angry. Maybe you've experienced unfairness with your siblings before. You know, I love my older sister so much, and I literally have thought she was always the coolest. And I'll never forget, when she was in high school, all I wanted to do was hang out with her and her friends. But every time I would come and try to hang out with them, she would yell, "Mom, Jimmy's in my room, please get her out." And it seemed like my mom would always side with my sister and would make me get out of her room. It felt so unfair that my mom wouldn't let me hang out with my sister and her friends. Now, as much as I felt like my life was unfair because my sister didn't want me to hang out with her and her friends, listen to this. Before Joseph was sold into slavery, his brothers were literally planning on killing him. They were so jealous of him, and I thought my sister was being unfair to me. In chapter 37, verse 19, they said to each other, meaning the brothers said to each other, "Here comes that dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of those cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." If I were Joseph, believe me, I would have sure been angry, frustrated, or even maybe resentful towards God. Like, how could God possibly let me be treated like this? I thought he cared about me. But do you know what we find out later in the story? Joseph is faithful to God. He's honest with him. He owned his faith even when his life was crazy unfair. You know, we're gonna see next week that in chapter 39, the Bible tells us that God was with Joseph the entire time, even in the unfair situations. Here's the thing, students. When it feels like everything is unfair, God is always there for us. He knows what we're going through, and he wants to help us through it. And you know what the best part is? He's not afraid of our honesty. I think that's something that a lot of us can struggle with, being honest with God. We might feel like he doesn't care or like he won't understand. We might want to be a good Christian and not get mad at God, but the truth is, God can handle our anger, our frustration, our confusion. He can literally handle it all, and He wants to hear from us. The Bible tells us that we can pour out our hearts to God. We can tell Him exactly how we're feeling, even if it's not pretty. You know, in the Bible, King David in the book of Psalms talks to God and gives us the perfect example of the type of prayer we could say to God when we're feeling like life is unfair. He says this, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from hearing my cries? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer by night, but I find no rest. When we're honest with God, something amazing happens. We start to feel a sense of peace, even when life is unfair. We start to see things from a different perspective. We start to trust that God has a plan for our lives, even when we might not understand the plan in that moment. And so, how do we be honest with God? It's important to know that those unfair moments don't just magically disappear when we pray. It's not like sending up a prayer to God and then click. Your life is fixed suddenly, like you just flipped a light switch or something. What happens is this: when we tell God how we really feel, He actually meets us exactly where we're at. He doesn't judge us or shame us for our emotions. He simply loves us and wants to help us through it. When we're honest with God, we start to see Him in a different way. We start to see Him as someone who is with us in our pain, not someone who caused it. We start to understand that He's not a distant being, but that He's a God that is personal and cares deeply about us and our well-being. Just like God was always with Joseph through the unfair moments in his life, He's with you and me too. So students, my challenge for all of us this week is that we would choose to own our faith even when life is unfair.